The set was buzzing with anticipation, cameras rolling, and the atmosphere crackling with tension, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. Kirk and Mendeecees, once inseparable allies, now stood on the edge of a war that threatened to shatter everything their fans had believed about their friendship. It all started during what was supposed to be a routine shoot, an ordinary day on set, yet the air felt electric, thick with unspoken grievances and long-simmering resentment. Fans are shocked, whispers echoing through social media feeds, speculating about the true cause behind this sudden clash. Rumors had been swirling for weeks, small disagreements, overlooked insults, jealous glances, but nobody imagined they would erupt into the kind of confrontation that would leave the entire crew frozen in disbelief. Emotions ran high the moment Kirk entered the room. Sources close to the set report that Mendeecees, already tense from previous exchanges, felt blindsided by a comment Kirk made about a past incident, one that had been swept under the rug for months. "I can't believe you'd even say that to me," Mendeecees reportedly shouted, his voice echoing off the walls, every syllable laced with fury and betrayal. Kirk, known for his quick temper, didn't hold back either. "You think I'm the problem here? Look at your own actions before pointing fingers." The argument escalated in seconds, with onlookers describing a scene that felt like it belonged in a season finale rather than a day of filming. Cameras captured every glare, every trembling hand, every jaw-clenching moment that had the crew questioning whether they should even continue recording. The family was left divided. Friends tried to intervene, but even their efforts seemed futile as accusations flew and old grudges resurfaced. Each man stood firmly in his corner, unyielding, their voices a mix of hurt and rage. Fans watching the live updates couldn't believe their eyes. How could these two men, once celebrated for their camaraderie, now be locked in a battle that seemed irreparable? Every reaction online mirrored the tension on set: disbelief, anger, and a desperate need for answers. And just when it seemed the confrontation had reached its peak, a sudden twist sent shockwaves through everyone present, leaving the crew, the cast, and the audience questioning who would emerge victorious, if anyone could at all. This is not just a fight. It's the unraveling of a bond once thought unbreakable. The lines between loyalty and betrayal, friendship and rivalry, have blurred beyond recognition. As the arguments escalated and voices grew louder, the truth remained elusive: what really caused this explosive clash, and how far would either of them go to defend their pride? Stay tuned, because what you're about to witness goes far beyond a simple on-set disagreement. This is drama, heartbreak, and betrayal rolled into one unforgettable, shocking moment that fans will be talking about for weeks to come. The tension on set had been building for weeks, though most of the crew assumed it was just typical workplace stress. But today, everything that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted in a storm that no one could have predicted. Kirk arrived first, his usual confident stride replaced by a stiffness that immediately caught the eyes of those around him. He avoided most interactions at first, focusing on his lines, his expressions, and his movements, but it was clear to anyone watching that something was wrong. The air itself seemed heavier, as if the set had become a charged battlefield waiting for a single spark to ignite it. Mendeecees, on the other hand, entered later, moving with his own kind of tension, a combination of controlled anger and simmering frustration. Their eyes met briefly, and for a fraction of a second, the entire set held its breath. Fans following live updates online immediately noticed the tension, flooding social media with messages like, "What's happening between Kirk and Mendeecees? And they're about to explode. You can see it in their faces." Cameras captured every detail, every twitch, every shift in posture, because everyone instinctively knew that this wasn't just a minor disagreement. It all started with a line reading. Kirk misinterpreted a comment from Mendeecees about rehearsal schedules as a personal attack, and that single misunderstanding became the spark. "You always act like the world revolves around you," Mendeecees barked, unable to contain his frustration any longer. Kirk's face reddened instantly. "Excuse me, I'm the one trying to keep this show from falling apart while you do whatever you want." The argument escalated quickly. Crew members tried to step in, but both men were too fired up to listen. Kirk gestured aggressively, pointing toward the script and then toward Mendeecees, his hands shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Do you even realize what you're saying right now? You've been undermining me for months," he shouted, his voice reverberating through the studio. The intensity of the confrontation left everyone stunned. What began as a simple dispute over work schedules had transformed into a full-blown clash of pride and ego. Friends and colleagues were forced to take sides almost immediately. Some tried to calm the situation, whispering in their ears, reminding them of past collaborations and shared successes, but neither man was willing to back down. "You think you're always right, don't you?" Mendeecees said, his voice cracking as his emotions spilled over. You've never considered anyone else's perspective. Kirk shot back, his tone sharp and cutting. It was as if every slight, every misunderstanding from the past had suddenly come to the surface at once, forming a tidal wave of anger, resentment, and disappointment. The set, which moments ago had been full of laughter and casual chatter, now felt like a war zone. Even the lighting seemed harsher, casting long shadows across their faces, exaggerating the furrowed brows and tight jaws, making the confrontation seem even more intense. The personal stakes only added to the drama. Kirk had recently faced criticism from fans online regarding his behavior off-camera, and Mendeecees had been dealing with rumors about secret alliances and betrayals within their shared circle. This fight wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, entwined with pride, reputation, and the fear of being humiliated in front of colleagues, friends, and fans. I don't care what anyone thinks about me, Mendeecees yelled, stepping closer, his eyes flashing with a mixture of hurt and rage. But I will not let you treat me like I'm invisible or insignificant. Kirk, now fully enraged, leaned in as well, their faces mere inches apart, voices escalating to the point where everyone on set flinched at the volume. The sound of their shouting bounced off the walls, creating an almost cinematic effect that made the crew feel like they were in the middle of a dramatic finale, not a routine shooting day. Fans online went into a frenzy as clips and pictures leaked almost immediately. The comments section exploded with speculation. They were best friends yesterday. Now look at this. What did Kirk say to trigger Mendeecees? And the family is going to be torn apart over this. The social media storm mirrored the chaos unfolding on set. Every gesture, every heated word, every piercing look became fodder for discussion and speculation. The fight was no longer contained to the physical space, it was now public, feeding a growing narrative of betrayal and broken trust. Some even claimed to have insider information, suggesting that this confrontation was just the tip of the iceberg, hinting at months of secret resentments, manipulations, and hidden slights that neither man had been willing to confront until now. As the argument continued, other cast members began to feel the strain. Tensions rippled outward, affecting lines, performances, and even the camera crew, who struggled to capture the unfolding chaos without becoming part of it. Friends who had once mediated between the two now looked on helplessly, caught in the crossfire. It's like watching a volcano erupt in slow motion, one crew member whispered, shaking his head. The emotions were raw and unfiltered, anger, betrayal, frustration, hurt all colliding in a storm that threatened to engulf everyone nearby. Some tried to separate the two, physically placing themselves between Kirk and Mendeecees, but even their presence was barely enough to slow the momentum of the confrontation. The energy was too volatile, the stakes too high, and the resentment too deep-seated for mere words to calm it. Suddenly, a shocking twist added fuel to the fire. An old secret, long buried, was accidentally mentioned by one of the crew during an attempt to mediate. "Remember what happened at the last rap party?" someone muttered, and the reaction was instantaneous. Kirk's eyes widened, and Mendeecees' face twisted with disbelief. "You brought that up," Mendeecees shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Kirk. "After all this time, you think I'd let you get away with that?" Kirk, defensive and enraged, snapped back, "I didn't bring it up, you did. But don't act like you've been innocent either." The revelation sent shockwaves through the set, turning a heated argument into a full-blown personal war. It wasn't just about the current shoot or past grievances anymore. It was about exposing long-hidden betrayals and proving who had the moral high ground. The fight reached a point where even the production manager, usually calm and collected, was forced to intervene. "Enough. Stop this right now," she yelled, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of their confrontation. Kirk and Mendeecees were no longer speaking, they were exchanging accusations, memories, and grievances in a way that felt almost ritualistic. As though this fight was a culmination of years of unresolved tension. Every insult, every defensive retort, every tearful declaration of hurt was amplified by the intensity of their emotions. Friends tried to offer support, whispering in their ears, "It's not worth it," but the words fell on deaf ears. As hours passed, the confrontation evolved. It wasn't just about who was right or wrong, it became a battle for dominance, for control over the narrative, and for the loyalty of everyone on set. Allies aligned themselves carefully, whispering strategies, defending one side or the other, and watching as the fallout threatened to divide friendships that had lasted for years. The air crackled with anticipation as everyone waited to see who would make the first move toward reconciliation, or whether this fight would end in complete devastation. The tension was almost unbearable. You could feel the weight of the drama pressing down, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see how the next explosive moment would unfold. Even as tempers flared and voices rose, moments of vulnerability began to surface. Kirk's eyes shimmered with frustration, exhaustion, and a hint of regret. Mendeecees' hands shook as he tried to control his anger, his chest heaving with pent-up emotion. Both men were human, and in their fury, they revealed cracks in the facade of invincibility they usually projected. These fleeting glimpses of vulnerability only heightened the tension, making the confrontation feel raw, real, and almost unbearably personal. Fans, watching from afar, speculated endlessly, analyzing every frame, every word, every expression, desperate to understand the emotional core of the clash. Some felt sympathy for Kirk, some sided with Mendeecees, and many simply couldn't believe that a friendship so celebrated could unravel so publicly and so violently. The climax of the confrontation arrived when Kirk made a shocking declaration. "If you think I'm walking away from this without being heard, you're wrong," he shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. Mendeecees responded immediately, his own voice rising in defiance. "And if you think I'll let you rewrite the story, you're even more wrong." The room seemed to vibrate with the force of their emotions. Everyone present, from the production assistants to the cameramen, watched in awe, fear, and fascination as the two men brought years of tension, friendship, loyalty, and betrayal to a head. It was a spectacle of raw human emotion, one that none of them would forget, and one that fans around the world would replay endlessly in clips and GIFs. Even after the shouting subsided, the energy on set remained electric. Whispered conversations, stunned silence, and occasional outbursts filled the studio. The fight had not been resolved. If anything, it had opened new wounds, forcing both men to confront truths they had avoided for years. Friends, family, and colleagues were left in shock, wondering if reconciliation was possible or if this marked the definitive end of a friendship that had once seemed unbreakable. The consequences of this clash would ripple outward, affecting not just the men themselves but everyone connected to them, leaving questions that had no immediate answers and tension that refused to dissipate. Fans continued to speculate online, creating theories, alliances, and rivalries of their own. Memes, reaction videos, and discussion threads multiplied by the minute, reflecting the intensity and public fascination with the drama. Comments poured in. "I never thought I'd see them like this. The tension is unbearable. And how could best friends become enemies overnight?" Social media became a mirror of the chaos on set, amplifying the stakes and ensuring that everyone, from casual fans to die-hard followers, felt invested in the outcome. The fight between Kirk and Mendeecees had evolved from a personal disagreement to a public spectacle, a high-stakes drama that combined anger, betrayal, and raw emotion in a way few had ever witnessed. Each word spoken, each gesture made, each glance exchanged carried the weight of years of history, resentment, and unspoken truths. There was no turning back now. The confrontation had set a new tone, one that would influence every interaction moving forward and leave an indelible mark on their relationship, the set, and the hearts of their fans. The aftermath of the initial explosion on set did little to calm the tension. If anything, it magnified it. Both Kirk and Mendeecees retreated briefly, taking a few steps back. Yet their eyes never left each other, still burning with unspoken accusations. Crew members whispered among themselves, unsure whether to resume filming or call it a day. The energy in the studio had shifted from professional focus to a palpable sense of anxiety, as if the walls themselves were holding in the storm. Each person present felt the pressure to choose sides. Though most hoped for a miracle reconciliation that seemed increasingly unlikely, fans online were relentless, dissecting every second of the confrontation. Clips of the shouting, gestures, and fleeting emotional cracks went viral within minutes. "They used to be inseparable," one fan commented. "Now it looks like a war zone. I can't even watch." The digital frenzy mirrored the chaos on set, adding layers of public scrutiny to a situation already charged with personal conflict. The second wave of conflict began when Kirk, seemingly trying to regain control, approached Mendeecees with what he thought was a conciliatory tone. "Look, I don't want this to spiral further," he said, his voice steady but tense, "but you need to understand my perspective here." Mendeecees froze for a moment, eyes narrowing as if weighing whether this was a genuine attempt at peace or another veiled attack. "Your perspective, Kirk, your perspective has caused nothing but pain," he shot back, his words sharp, each syllable dripping with frustration. The exchange quickly escalated again, voices overlapping, cutting each other off, their emotions raw and unfiltered. The crew tried again to intervene, some placing themselves between the two, others gesturing frantically to calm the storm, but nothing worked. It was as if the longer this fight went on, the deeper the chasm between them became. Tensions grew further when old grievances came to light. Mendeecees brought up a past incident during a behind-the-scenes event that had left him humiliated. And Kirk responded with a long-standing issue he felt had been ignored. "You think I forgot what you did at the launch party?" Mendeecees spat, his voice rising. Kirk's reaction was immediate. "You're still holding on to that. I moved on months ago. Unlike you, I don't dwell on the past." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the argument had transcended its initial cause and was now dredging up years of unspoken resentment. Every word, every gesture, every shouted accusation was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal, disappointment, and hurt that neither man could untangle easily. The atmosphere grew even more chaotic when friends and family members who had arrived on set for support found themselves pulled into the conflict. "Stop dragging everyone else into this," one mutual friend begged, but their plea only seemed to add fuel to the fire. Both Kirk and Mendeecees were now fully committed to airing every grievance, justified or not, and nothing could distract them from the storm brewing between them. "I trusted you," Kirk yelled, his voice breaking with emotion, "and you throw it all away over petty misunderstandings." Mendeecees' eyes glistened with anger and hurt. "Trust? You've never understood what that means. Every step I took, every decision, was scrutinized, mocked, and undermined." The words hung in the air like lightning before a storm, striking everyone present with the intensity of the raw human emotion they carried. The escalation was punctuated by moments of silence that felt almost deafening. Each pause allowed the tension to thicken, giving the crew and observers time to brace themselves for the next explosion. Both men paced the set, their movements erratic, their faces betraying exhaustion as well as rage. Every gesture seemed loaded with symbolism, hands clenched, brows furrowed, eyes darting, expressing volumes that words alone could not capture. Fans dissected these moments online, interpreting every glance and sigh as evidence of betrayal, guilt, or hidden agendas. The digital narrative grew as complicated as the drama on set itself, with every angle scrutinized, analyzed, and debated endlessly. A particularly dramatic twist occurred when an unexpected source stepped in with information that neither Kirk nor Mendeecees had anticipated. A production assistant, trying to mediate, inadvertently revealed a miscommunication from earlier in the week that had been misinterpreted as sabotage. "I never meant to. I just thought," the assistant stammered, but their words were drowned out by the renewed volley of accusations. Kirk seized upon the revelation to assert his position, claiming that Mendeecees had been intentionally deceptive. "See? Even your own team knows what you've been doing," he yelled, while Mendeecees countered fiercely, "That's not true. Don't twist this around to make me look guilty." The set felt like it was on the verge of implosion. Every attempt at mediation only intensified the conflict, revealing how fragile their friendship had truly become. Emotions ran even higher when personal attacks entered the conversation. Remarks about career decisions, family loyalty, and public image were hurled across the studio floor with cutting precision. "You've always cared more about your reputation than the people around you," Kirk snapped, his voice trembling with anger. Mendeecees, visibly shaken, responded, "And you act like you're perfect, untouchable, above everyone else." The intensity of the verbal battle left the crew in awe, watching as two adults transformed into children in the throes of anger, pride, and unresolved pain. The public, following live updates and leaks, reacted in kind, some siding with Kirk, some with Mendeecees, and others simply horrified that best friends could unravel so publicly. Amid the chaos, brief moments of vulnerability surfaced. Mendeecees' voice softened as he recalled instances where he felt unsupported, while Kirk's eyes betrayed a mix of frustration and regret. These glimpses, however fleeting, were immediately overshadowed by renewed accusations, keeping the confrontation suspended in a state of unpredictable volatility. Fans latched on to these moments, interpreting them as signs of a potential reconciliation, only to be disappointed as the drama surged again, more intense than before. It was a roller coaster of emotion, one that neither man nor anyone on set could escape. As the day stretched on, the conflict began to affect the workflow. Lines were flubbed, cameras wobbled, and the once-ordered sequence of shooting devolved into chaos. Directors and producers scrambled to maintain control, but the intensity between Kirk and Mendeecees was such that the entire production seemed at risk. Crew members whispered anxiously, calculating how long it might take for one of them to storm off entirely or for the fight to reach an even more explosive peak. The energy in the room was almost tangible, a living force shaped by anger, betrayal, and frustration, threatening to spill over with every passing minute. Then came an unexpected turn. Kirk, seemingly exhausted and desperate for resolution, made an unprecedented proposal. "Let's settle this, once and for all," he said, his tone urgent but calm. Mendeecees, suspicious and defensive, hesitated, weighing the offer against months of resentment. "Settle how?" he asked, a flicker of cautious hope hidden behind the anger. Kirk's eyes hardened. Face to face, everything out in the open. No filters, no excuses. The crew collectively held their breath, sensing that this could either mark the beginning of reconciliation or push them past the point of no return. The confrontation took on a new intensity as both men prepared to confront not only each other but their own fears, insecurities, and the complex history that had brought them to this breaking point. Every insult, every raised voice, every trembling hand was now layered with the weight of past betrayals, public perception, and the stakes of their professional lives. Friends and family watched anxiously, unsure whether to intervene or let the process unfold, knowing that either choice carried significant consequences. The tension was so thick it seemed almost impossible to breathe, a living entity that had consumed the entire set, leaving everyone on edge and unsure of what the next moment might bring. Even as tempers flared and accusations flew, a subtle undertone of longing for resolution lingered in the air. Both men, despite their anger, showed signs of understanding the magnitude of the conflict. "We can't keep going like this," Mendeecees admitted, his voice wavering slightly. Kirk's response was measured but firm. "I know, but it has to be honest. No more hiding." The acknowledgement that a resolution was necessary, even if not yet achieved, added a layer of complexity to the drama, making it feel simultaneously explosive and vulnerable, volatile and real. Fans watching the unfolding events on social media felt every ounce of this tension, analyzing every glance, every pause, every nuance, desperate to anticipate the outcome. The day ended with both men exhausted but still unyielding, the crew wary, and fans worldwide captivated by the unfolding spectacle. The argument had not concluded, it had simply evolved, shifting from initial sparks to a simmering, complex conflict filled with personal stakes, historical grievances, and raw emotion. What had started as a professional dispute had transformed into a deeply personal confrontation, a public spectacle that blurred the line between reality and performance, leaving everyone involved, including the audience, questioning what would happen next and whether this friendship could survive the storm that had been unleashed. The following day on set felt charged with an almost unbearable intensity, as if the previous day's confrontation had left an invisible mark on every corner of the studio. Kirk arrived early, his usual swagger replaced by a tense, measured gait, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of suspicion and determination. He carried himself like a man bracing for battle, aware that any misstep could reignite the storm that had erupted yesterday. Mendeecees arrived shortly after, his expression equally guarded, a mix of anger and lingering hurt etched across his features. The crew, acutely aware of the potential for another explosive confrontation, moved cautiously, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while avoiding anything that might trigger a repeat of the chaos. Fans online were already speculating about what might happen, flooding social media with posts like, "Are we about to witness round 2? And they can't just pretend yesterday didn't happen, right?" The anticipation was palpable, both on set and across the digital landscape, creating a pressure cooker atmosphere that made every glance and gesture fraught with meaning. The tension reached a new peak during the first scene of the day. Kirk and Mendeecees were required to work in close proximity, and the mere act of standing near each other seemed to reignite sparks. An innocuous line about leadership and loyalty triggered an immediate reaction. "You think you can lecture me about loyalty?" Mendeecees snapped, his voice echoing across the studio. Kirk shot back instantly. "And you think I don't know what you've been doing behind my back?" The crew froze, recognizing that this was no ordinary argument. It was a continuation of yesterday's emotional explosion, fueled now by the added weight of proximity and obligation. The cameras rolled, capturing every facial twitch, every tremor in the hands, every fleeting glare, all while the production team struggled to maintain control. Every eye on set, including the lens of the camera, seemed to magnify the intensity, leaving no room for subtlety or escape. Old wounds were dredged up with alarming speed. Mendeecees recalled moments when he felt undermined, ignored, or publicly embarrassed, while Kirk countered with incidents where he believed Mendeecees had betrayed his trust. "You think I don't remember the launch event?" Mendeecees accused, his voice cracking with emotion. Kirk's response was sharp and cutting. I remember, and I don't care what you think. Your version of events is twisted. The back and forth escalated, each accusation piling atop the last, until the tension in the room felt almost suffocating. Crew members whispered in tight clusters, unsure how to intervene without escalating the situation further. The emotional energy between the two men had become so intense that it seemed to ripple outward, affecting not only their own performances but the mood and focus of everyone around them. Family members who had come to support both men were caught in the crossfire. Please, stop dragging everyone else into this, one relative implored. But their words were drowned out by the renewed intensity of the argument. Kirk and Mendeecees were now fully engrossed in a verbal sparring match. Neither willing to relent, each determined to assert dominance and reclaim their narrative. Every insult was met with a sharper retort, every defensive statement with an accusation, creating a cycle that threatened to consume the entire day's shoot. Fans watching online commented in real time, some shocked, others fascinated, all trying to decipher who held the moral high ground. The online reaction added another layer of pressure, as both men were now performing their anger not only for the crew and cameras but for a global audience dissecting every nuance. A sudden revelation reignited the conflict in a way no one had anticipated. During an attempt to mediate, a crew member accidentally mentioned a conversation from weeks earlier in which Mendeecees allegedly spoke poorly about Kirk's leadership on set. I never said that, Mendeecees shouted, his face reddening. Kirk's eyes narrowed, and he leaned in aggressively. Don't lie to me. I know what I heard. The miscommunication escalated the confrontation further, turning a verbal disagreement into a battle over truth, memory, and credibility. The crew scrambled, trying to calm the situation, but every attempt at intervention seemed only to add fuel to the fire. Friends whispered frantically, unsure whether to separate the two men physically or simply step back and let the tension run its course. Emotions ran at their peak as personal attacks began to surface. Kirk criticized Mendeecees' judgment, decisions, and even his personal life, while Mendeecees fired back, attacking Kirk's ego, temperament, and past choices. The verbal volley was relentless, leaving little room for reason or mediation. The intensity of the conflict drew the attention of producers and directors, who recognized the potential danger to both the production schedule and the emotional well-being of the cast. Attempts to redirect focus to work were met with derision and further accusations, highlighting the depth of resentment that had taken root between these once close friends. The drama was no longer contained to professional grievances. It had become intensely personal, exposing vulnerabilities, insecurities, and long-suppressed frustrations. A particularly dramatic moment occurred when Kirk made an unexpected admission. Maybe I have held things back too, he said, his voice low but charged with emotion. Mendeecees paused, visibly shocked by the sudden vulnerability. What are you saying? He demanded, suspicion and curiosity mingling in his tone. Kirk continued, I'm saying that I've been frustrated, too. That doesn't make it right, but I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. The admission did little to calm the storm entirely but introduced a new dynamic and acknowledgement that both men were human. Both had been hurt, and both were navigating a complicated tangle of pride, loyalty, and emotion. Fans online immediately latched onto the exchange, interpreting it as a potential turning point, though the tension remained high. As the day progressed, the confrontation evolved into a complex dance of words, gestures, and subtle psychological maneuvers. Kirk attempted to assert dominance through calm reasoning, while Mendeecees countered with emotional appeals and pointed reminders of past grievances. The interplay was intricate, each side navigating a delicate balance between anger, pride, and the potential for reconciliation. The crew watched in tense silence, aware that the outcome could shape not only the remainder of the day's shoot, but the future of both men's professional and personal relationship. Every glance, every sigh, every pause carried meaning, and the set felt like a stage where history, emotion, and drama converged in a single, high-stakes performance. Unexpectedly, the argument spilled into moments of reflection. Both men paused, considering the magnitude of what had transpired. Kirk's hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair, and Mendeecees' shoulders slumped, a rare show of fatigue from the emotional toll. These moments, fleeting as they were, hinted at the possibility of resolution. Though neither was willing to fully embrace it yet, the tension remained a living, breathing force on set, one that demanded attention and respect. While fans continued to speculate, debate, and dissect every moment of the unfolding drama, the day's events would be replayed, analyzed, and shared endlessly, each frame offering new insights into the fragility, intensity, and complexity of the friendship between Kirk and Mendeecees. The climax of Part 2 arrived during a lunch break, when the two men were momentarily left alone. The silence was almost deafening, and both seemed to be weighing the choices ahead. Would they escalate again, or would this quiet moment mark the beginning of a fragile truce? The answer remained uncertain, as both men were aware that any interaction could tip the scales dramatically in either direction. Their friendship, once thought unbreakable, had been exposed to raw scrutiny, and both were forced to confront truths that had been buried for years. Friends, crew members, and fans all waited with bated breath, aware that the resolution or lack thereof would define the narrative for months to come. The day ended with neither man fully reconciled, but the groundwork for Part 3 had been laid. Both Kirk and Mendeecees had been forced to confront the depth of their grievances, the intensity of their emotions, and the fragility of their bond. The crew left the set exhausted, shaken, and uncertain, knowing that the next confrontation would be just as charged, if not more. Fans continued to monitor updates online, analyzing every interaction, every word, and every expression, captivated by the ongoing drama. The story was far from over, and the next chapter promised even more revelations, emotional confrontations, and shocking twists that would keep audiences enthralled. The following morning brought with it a tense quiet that seemed almost unnatural for a set accustomed to constant motion, laughter, and chatter. Kirk arrived first, his eyes scanning the room like a general preparing for battle. Every movement deliberate, calculated, and measured. Mendeecees followed shortly after, his steps heavy with anticipation, the lingering anger from the previous days evident in every muscle of his body. Crew members moved cautiously, aware that any misstep could reignite the simmering tension that had already caused chaos. Social media was ablaze once more, with fans speculating wildly. Are we about to witness the ultimate showdown? One post read, "I can't believe two best friends could fall apart like this." The buzz added a layer of pressure neither Kirk nor Mendeecees needed, amplifying every glance, gesture, and word exchanged between them. The day's first scene placed Kirk and Mendeecees in close proximity once again, forcing them to confront each other under the scrutinizing eyes of the cameras. As they began rehearsing, an innocuous line about teamwork sparked immediate tension. "Do you even understand what loyalty means?" Mendeecees shot back, his tone sharp and dripping with emotion. Kirk's eyes narrowed. "I've been loyal, but you keep pushing boundaries," he responded, his voice a mix of frustration and incredulity. The argument escalated quickly, both men speaking over one another, voices cutting through the studio with alarming intensity. Crew members scrambled to maintain some semblance of order, but the conflict was now so charged that intervention felt almost impossible. Every gesture, every tremor of the hands, every quickened breath carried meaning, adding weight to each word exchanged. Old grievances resurfaced like ghosts haunting the present. Mendeecees brought up a series of past incidents where he felt betrayed or undermined, while Kirk countered with moments where he believed Mendeecees had been deceitful or manipulative. "You think I've forgotten what happened at the premiere?" Mendeecees yelled, his voice cracking with raw emotion. Kirk's response was immediate and fierce. "Forget it. You twisted the truth. You made everything about you." The dialogue, though chaotic, revealed a deeper emotional layer to the conflict, a history of hurt and mistrust that had been ignored or suppressed for too long. Crew members exchanged worried glances, understanding that this confrontation had evolved far beyond a simple disagreement. It was now a full-scale emotional battle. Family members who had arrived to provide support found themselves trapped in the crossfire, unable to mediate effectively without risking further escalation. "Please, stop dragging everyone else into this," a relative pleaded, but their words fell flat against the torrent of anger and accusation. Kirk and Mendeecees were fully absorbed in their verbal duel, trading barbs, defensive statements, and pointed reminders of past grievances. Each verbal strike landed like a hammer blow, leaving the crew anxious and uncertain about what might happen next. Fans following live updates were equally riveted, interpreting each comment, pause, and gesture as evidence of shifting alliances and hidden truths. A new twist emerged when an assistant inadvertently mentioned a long-forgotten comment that Mendeecees had supposedly made about Kirk during a previous shoot. "I didn't mean it that way," the assistant stammered, but the words only added fuel to the fire. Kirk seized the moment to reinforce his argument. "See, everyone remembers what you've been saying behind my back." Mendeecees shot back vehemently. "That's not true. Stop twisting things to make me look bad." The conversation spiraled rapidly, moving from misunderstandings to outright confrontations about credibility and intent. The crew's attempts to intervene were ineffective. The emotional stakes had risen too high, and the storm between the two men was unstoppable. As personal attacks became more intense, the argument took on a psychological dimension. Kirk criticized Mendeecees' judgment, temperament, and decision-making, while Mendeecees countered with attacks on Kirk's ego, choices, and priorities. The volley of verbal blows left everyone on set on edge, watching in awe as years of suppressed frustration and resentment were brought to the surface in real time. The drama, once confined to professional grievances, had become deeply personal, exposing vulnerabilities, insecurities, and long-standing frustrations that neither man had previously addressed. At a pivotal moment, Kirk offered an unexpected gesture of vulnerability. "I may not have handled things perfectly," he admitted, his voice low but intense. Mendeecees paused, visibly startled by the sudden honesty. "What do you mean?" he asked, a mix of suspicion and curiosity in his tone. "I'm saying I've been frustrated too," Kirk continued, "and I've made mistakes. But pretending everything is fine isn't helping either of us." The brief acknowledgement of shared struggle did little to fully calm the tension but introduced a new dynamic. Fans immediately seized upon the exchange, speculating that it could be the beginning of a fragile reconciliation. Though the conflict's intensity remained undeniable, the argument gradually evolved into a complex interplay of power, emotion, and psychological maneuvering. Kirk attempted to assert dominance through calm reasoning, while Mendeecees countered with pointed reminders of past grievances and emotional appeals. The delicate dance highlighted not only the depth of their conflict but also the intricacies of their personal and professional relationship. Crew members watched with bated breath, recognizing that the outcome could shape not just the remainder of the day's work, but the long-term trajectory of both men's careers and friendships. Every glance, pause, and subtle movement carried significance, creating a high-stakes drama that felt both unscripted and unavoidable. Moments of reflection occasionally punctuated the heated exchanges. Kirk ran his hands through his hair, the strain of the emotional toll evident, while Mendeecees slumped slightly, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. These fleeting signs of vulnerability hinted at the possibility of resolution. Though neither was willing to fully embrace it yet, the tension remained, a living force that seemed to fill the studio, influencing the actions, reactions, and thoughts of everyone present. Fans online continued to monitor every movement, every word, and every glance, interpreting each as a potential turning point in the ongoing drama. By midday, the argument had transformed into a strategic confrontation. Both men carefully measured their words and gestures, balancing anger, pride, and vulnerability in a delicate equilibrium. Kirk sought to maintain authority while expressing frustration, while Mendeecees used emotion and memory to challenge his counterpart's claims. The intensity was almost tangible, creating a charged atmosphere that permeated the set and radiated outward to those observing from afar. Crew members were acutely aware of the potential consequences, noting that any escalation could have lasting repercussions, not just professionally but personally for both men. The scene reached its peak when an emotionally charged revelation surfaced. Kirk, attempting to assert his perspective, recalled an incident Mendeecees had been involved in months earlier, framing it in a way that reignited past anger. "Do you even realize the damage you caused?" Kirk demanded, voice tight with emotion. Mendeecees' face twisted with disbelief and fury. "Don't you dare bring that up again. You think I haven't suffered enough?" The clash reignited the storm, intensifying emotions and leaving the crew scrambling to maintain composure. The personal history between the two men became a battlefield, every word loaded with significance, every gesture a potential catalyst for escalation. Even in moments of apparent calm, the tension remained thick. Both Kirk and Mendeecees were acutely aware of the high stakes and the eyes of fans and colleagues upon them. Brief pauses were filled with charged silence, each man calculating his next move, each aware that the outcome of this confrontation could redefine their relationship permanently. Friends and family present on set observed anxiously, knowing that the emotional toll had reached a critical point, and that even small gestures could tip the balance between reconciliation and further conflict. As the afternoon wore on, subtle shifts hinted at the possibility of resolution. Kirk's voice softened slightly when recounting his own frustrations, and Mendeecees' gestures revealed brief moments of reconsideration. Yet these glimpses of potential reconciliation were fleeting, constantly overshadowed by the intensity of unresolved grievances. The conflict had become a complex web of past hurts, pride, and public scrutiny, each factor influencing the next, ensuring that the drama remained both unpredictable and captivating. Fans, captivated by every update and leaked clip, continued to dissect the emotional intricacies, creating a narrative that extended far beyond the studio walls. The day concluded with both men physically exhausted but emotionally unresolved. They had confronted each other, aired grievances, and exposed vulnerabilities, but the battle was far from over. The crew left the set shaken, aware that the next encounter could bring either reconciliation or complete devastation. Fans, still glued to every online update, speculated endlessly about the next chapter, their attention and engagement ensuring that the unfolding drama would continue to dominate conversations for days, weeks, and potentially months to come. The following day, the atmosphere on set was electric with tension, almost as if the walls themselves had absorbed the echoes of the previous confrontations. Kirk arrived first, his gaze sharp and deliberate, scanning the room like a man preparing for a duel. Every movement he made seemed calculated, as though he were rehearsing strategies in his mind before stepping into the inevitable collision with Mendeecees. Not long after, Mendeecees entered, equally tense, his jaw tight, every step carrying the weight of anticipation and lingering resentment. Crew members moved cautiously, aware that any misstep could reignite the volatility that had already thrown their schedule into disarray. Social media had become a storm of speculation, with fans creating memes, videos, and commentary analyzing every word and gesture from the previous days. Round 3 is coming. One comment read, "They're about to tear each other apart in front of the cameras." The digital chatter added an extra layer of pressure, as both men knew that millions of eyes were now scrutinizing their every move. The morning scene required Kirk and Mendeecees to interact closely once again, and the proximity reignited sparks almost immediately. A simple line about teamwork acted as a catalyst for renewed tension. "You really think loyalty is a one-way street?" Mendeecees fired, his voice brimming with accusation. Kirk's eyes narrowed, a flash of frustration crossing his face. "I've given more loyalty than you can even comprehend, yet you keep testing my patience," he snapped. The argument escalated quickly, voices overlapping, cutting each other off, and sending waves of tension across the set. Crew members tried desperately to intervene, some placing themselves strategically between the two, others attempting verbal mediation, but the intensity had grown so thick that it became almost physical. Every glance, every twitch, every exhale carried emotional weight, making even minor movements fraught with significance. As the conflict intensified, old grievances resurfaced like buried explosives, threatening to obliterate any chance of calm. Mendeecees dredged up moments where he felt ignored, belittled, or betrayed, while Kirk countered with incidents where he felt undermined, misrepresented, or publicly embarrassed. "You really think I forgot what you said at the premiere?" Mendeecees yelled, his voice cracking with raw emotion. Kirk fired back instantly. "Forget it. You twisted the truth, made it all about yourself." The back and forth revealed the deep-seated resentment and unresolved pain that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Crew members exchanged tense glances, realizing that the confrontation was no longer about simple professional disagreements but had evolved into a battle over trust, respect, and personal integrity. Family members present for support found themselves in the crossfire, caught between attempting to mediate and avoiding further escalation. "Stop dragging everyone else into this," one pleaded, but their voice was drowned out in the torrent of accusations. Kirk and Mendeecees were fully consumed by their conflict, each determined to assert their narrative and prove their position. Every insult, every defensive retort, every reminder of past wrongs added layers of complexity to the dispute. Fans following updates online reacted passionately, taking sides, debating who was right or wrong, and dissecting the emotional nuances of every exchange. The public's fascination amplified the pressure, turning a personal feud into a spectacle watched and analyzed by thousands of eyes. An unexpected revelation during a brief attempt at mediation reignited the fire. A production assistant accidentally mentioned a conversation Mendeecees had allegedly had about Kirk weeks prior, which Kirk interpreted as betrayal. "That never happened," Mendeecees shouted, his face flushed with anger. Kirk leaned in aggressively. "Don't lie to me. I know exactly what you said." The incident escalated tensions, transforming a simple miscommunication into an argument about credibility, trust, and intent. Crew members attempted to calm the situation, but the emotional stakes had reached a point where any intervention seemed to feed the intensity rather than reduce it. Friends whispered anxiously, torn between stepping in and letting the confrontation run its course, knowing that either choice could have serious consequences. As the argument evolved, personal attacks became sharper and more cutting. Kirk criticized Mendeecees' judgment, decisions, and even questioned his priorities, while Mendeecees countered with pointed remarks about Kirk's ego, temperament, and past actions. Each verbal exchange acted like a spark in a room full of gas, the potential for explosion ever present. The intensity left everyone on set stunned. Witnessing the unraveling of a friendship in real time, a mix of awe, disbelief, and fear for what might happen next. The conflict had moved beyond professional grievances, exposing vulnerabilities, insecurities, and long-standing frustrations that neither man had previously acknowledged. A pivotal moment arrived when Kirk, in a rare gesture of vulnerability, admitted, "I've made mistakes too." Mendeecees paused, visibly taken aback by the sudden honesty. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "I've been frustrated as well," Kirk continued, "but pretending everything is fine hasn't helped either of us." While the admission didn't completely dissipate the tension, it added a layer of complexity, suggesting that both men were struggling with their own pain and guilt. Fans immediately latched onto this exchange, interpreting it as a potential turning point. Even as the argument's intensity remained high, the confrontation transformed into a nuanced psychological battle, with Kirk attempting to maintain control through calm reasoning and Mendeecees using emotional appeals and reminders of past grievances to challenge him. The interplay was intricate, revealing the emotional depth of their conflict and the fragile nature of their relationship. Crew members watched in tense silence, aware that the outcome could influence the rest of the day's production and the long-term trajectory of both men's careers and personal bond. Every subtle gesture, glance, or pause carried meaning, amplifying the high-stakes drama unfolding in front of them. Moments of reflection punctuated the heated exchanges. Kirk ran his hands through his hair, a subtle sign of stress, while Mendeecees slumped in a rare display of fatigue. These glimpses of vulnerability hinted at the possibility of reconciliation, though neither was ready to fully embrace it. The tension was still a palpable force on set, influencing everyone in the room and spilling into the digital world as fans speculated, debated, and dissected every moment. The narrative had expanded beyond the set, with the conflict now existing in both physical and virtual spaces, each reinforcing the other. By late afternoon, the argument had reached an intricate balance of power and emotion. Kirk sought to assert authority while expressing frustration, and Mendeecees countered with emotional intensity and pointed reminders of past grievances. The dynamic was delicate, every word and gesture laden with meaning. The crew's awareness of the stakes only heightened the tension, as they realized that any escalation could have lasting repercussions, both professionally and personally. The climax of the day arrived when an emotionally charged revelation was brought to the forefront. Kirk recalled a previous incident, framing it in a way that reignited old anger. "Do you realize the damage you've caused?" he demanded. Mendeecees' expression twisted with fury. "Don't you dare bring that up again," he shouted. The argument surged once more, intense and unrelenting, leaving the crew scrambling to manage the situation. It was clear that the personal history between the two men had become a battlefield, with every word, gesture, and expression carrying the weight of years of unresolved tension. Even brief moments of calm carried an underlying charge. Kirk and Mendeecees were acutely aware of the stakes, knowing that millions of fans and colleagues were observing their every move. Pauses were loaded with anticipation, each man calculating his next response carefully. Friends and family on set watched anxiously, aware of the emotional toll and the potential for further escalation. Subtle gestures, fleeting eye contact, and measured breaths all hinted at the fragile state of their relationship, with reconciliation and conflict constantly competing for dominance. As the day drew to a close, it was evident that neither man had fully resolved his emotions. They had confronted each other, exposed vulnerabilities, and aired grievances, but the tension remained. The crew left exhausted, aware that the next encounter could be even more explosive. Fans continued to monitor every update, deeply invested in the ongoing drama. The story was far from over, and the next chapter promised even more emotional confrontations, shocking twists, and unpredictable outcomes that would keep audiences glued to their screens for days to come. The morning sun cast a harsh light across the studio, illuminating every corner where tension had begun to fester over the past several days. Kirk arrived first, his stride purposeful and measured, each step echoing with the weight of anticipation, as if the very act of walking toward the set was a challenge to fate itself. He carried with him the unresolved anger from the previous confrontations, layered with the exhaustion that comes from long-simmering resentment. The air was thick, almost oppressive, with the collective energy of crew members, family, and production staff who had come to witness a friendship teetering on the edge of collapse. Mendeecees entered moments later, his expression a careful mask of calm, though the subtle tension in his shoulders and the sharpness of his gaze betrayed the storm churning within. From the moment he stepped onto the set, it was clear that the events of the last week had left deep, invisible scars, and the emotional landscape between the two men was now a minefield, each interaction loaded with potential for explosion. The studio itself seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the gravity of the confrontation that was about to unfold. Fans online, who had been following every leaked moment, every whispered rumor, were watching with rapt attention, speculating endlessly about what might happen next, posting theories, and creating a digital echo chamber that amplified the stakes. Comments ranged from fearful predictions to sensational claims, with thousands eagerly dissecting body language, tone, and the nuances of every word exchanged. The first scene of the day placed Kirk and Mendeecees in close proximity, a situation that acted as a catalyst for emotions long suppressed. An innocuous line about collaboration became a spark in dry kindling. Mendeecees' voice, tinged with sharp accusation, cut through the air. "Do you really think loyalty is a one-way street, Kirk?" His words were deliberate, meant to provoke, and they succeeded immediately. Kirk's gaze sharpened, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he countered with controlled fury. "I've been loyal beyond what you can comprehend, yet you continue to challenge every decision I make." The argument escalated quickly, voices overlapping, each trying to assert dominance, each striving to reclaim moral and emotional high ground. Crew members moved cautiously, some attempting verbal mediation, others positioning themselves strategically between the two men. But the tension was so palpable that even the smallest gesture could trigger another eruption. Every glance, every subtle twitch, every breath seemed amplified, heavy with meaning, as the emotional energy radiated outward, infecting the room with a charged intensity that was impossible to ignore. Old grievances surfaced with the force of a tidal wave. Mendeecees brought up incidents where he felt undermined, ignored, or publicly embarrassed, recalling them with a precision that suggested they had been catalogued and stored with painful care over years of friendship. Kirk, equally prepared, countered with moments where he had felt betrayed or misrepresented, painting a picture of mistrust and frustration that had long simmered beneath the surface. "You really think I've forgotten the premiere?" Mendeecees shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of accumulated emotion. Kirk's retort was immediate and cutting. "Forget it. You twisted everything to serve your own narrative." The volley of accusations left the crew watching in stunned silence, recognizing that this confrontation had grown far beyond professional disagreements. It had transformed into a deeply personal battlefield, with trust and respect hanging precariously in the balance. Family members present to support both men found themselves caught in the crossfire, their pleas for calm drowned out by the torrent of anger and recrimination. Every word exchanged seemed to open a new wound, and the emotional intensity continued to climb, turning each interaction into a high-stakes negotiation of pride, history, and hurt. During a brief lull, a production assistant inadvertently referenced a conversation that Mendeecees had allegedly had about Kirk weeks earlier, which Kirk immediately interpreted as a personal attack. "That never happened," Mendeecees protested, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. Kirk leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Don't lie to me. I know exactly what was said." The miscommunication reignited the storm with renewed force, turning a simple misunderstanding into a full-scale confrontation over credibility and trust. Crew members attempted to intervene, but each effort seemed to only feed the intensity. The emotional energy now a tangible force within the studio. Friends and relatives watched with mounting anxiety, unsure whether to separate the two men physically or simply allow the drama to unfold, knowing that either choice could have far-reaching consequences. As the confrontation continued, the nature of the verbal exchanges grew increasingly personal and pointed. Kirk criticized Mendeecees' judgment, leadership, and even his decision-making outside of work, while Mendeecees fired back with attacks on Kirk's ego, temperament, and perceived failures. Each verbal blow landed with weight, leaving both men exposed and the crew collectively holding its breath, aware that the slightest escalation could lead to a physical confrontation. The emotional stakes were now immense, and the drama unfolded in a way that seemed almost cinematic in its intensity. Fans following every update online were captivated, dissecting each word and gesture, debating loyalties, and analyzing the psychological dynamics at play. A pivotal moment occurred when Kirk, in a rare gesture of vulnerability, admitted, "I've made mistakes too." Mendeecees' reaction was one of surprise, the sudden honesty catching him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, suspicion and curiosity intertwined in his tone. Kirk's voice softened slightly. "I've been frustrated as well, and pretending everything is fine hasn't helped either of us. The acknowledgement did not immediately resolve the conflict but introduced a subtle shift in the emotional dynamic. It was a reminder that both men were human, both had been hurt, and both were navigating the precarious balance between pride and reconciliation. Fans online immediately seized upon this moment, speculating about the potential for reconciliation, even as tension continued to simmer. The argument evolved into a strategic interplay of emotion and psychology. Kirk sought to maintain authority and control through reasoned arguments, while Mendeecees used emotional appeals and pointed recollections of past grievances to challenge him. The intricate dance between pride, frustration, and vulnerability created a charged atmosphere, one that left the crew on edge and the audience captivated. Every gesture, glance, and pause became a component of the high-stakes drama, with the potential to tip the scales toward reconciliation or further conflict. By mid-afternoon, the confrontation had reached an almost unbearable intensity. Kirk and Mendeecees were fully engaged in a psychological tug-of-war, balancing anger, vulnerability, and pride in a delicate equilibrium. Crew members were acutely aware of the danger of years of unresolved tension. Even brief moments of calm carried an underlying charge. Kirk and Mendeecees were acutely aware of the stakes, knowing that millions of fans and colleagues were observing their every move. Pauses were loaded with anticipation, each man calculating his next response carefully. Friends and family on set watched anxiously, aware of the emotional toll and the potential for further escalation. Subtle gestures, fleeting eye contact, and measured breaths all hinted at the fragile state of their relationship. With reconciliation and conflict constantly competing for dominance, as the day drew to a close, it was evident that neither man had fully resolved his emotions. They had confronted each other, exposed vulnerabilities, and aired grievances, but the tension remained. The crew left exhausted, aware that the next encounter could be even more explosive. Fans continued to monitor every update, deeply invested in the ongoing drama. The story was far from over, and the next chapter promised even more emotional confrontations, shocking twists, and unpredictable outcomes that would keep audiences glued to their screens for days to come. The morning sun cast a harsh light across the studio, illuminating every corner where tension had begun to fester over the past several days. Kirk arrived first, his stride purposeful and measured, each step echoing with the weight of anticipation, as if the very act of walking toward the set was a challenge to fate itself. He carried with him the unresolved anger from the previous confrontations, layered with the exhaustion that comes from long-simmering resentment. The air was thick, almost oppressive, with the collective energy of crew members, family, and production staff who had come to witness a friendship teetering on the edge of collapse. Mendeecees entered moments later, his expression a careful mask of calm, though the subtle tension in his shoulders and the sharpness of his gaze betrayed the storm churning within. From the moment he stepped onto the set, it was clear that the events of the last week had left deep, invisible scars, and the emotional landscape between the two men was now a minefield, each interaction loaded with potential for explosion. The studio itself seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the gravity of the confrontation that was about to unfold. Fans online, who had been following every leaked moment, every whispered rumor, were watching with rapt attention, speculating endlessly about what might happen next, posting theories, and creating a digital echo chamber that amplified the stakes. Comments ranged from fearful predictions to sensational claims, with thousands eagerly dissecting body language, tone, and the nuances of every word exchanged. The first scene of the day placed Kirk and Mendeecees in close proximity, a situation that acted as a catalyst for emotions long suppressed. An innocuous line about collaboration became a spark in dry kindling. Mendeecees' voice, tinged with sharp accusation, cut through the air. "Do you really think loyalty is a one-way street, Kirk?" His words were deliberate, meant to provoke, and they succeeded immediately. Kirk's gaze sharpened, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he countered with controlled fury. "I've been loyal beyond what you can comprehend, yet you continue to challenge every decision I make." The argument escalated quickly, voices overlapping, each trying to assert dominance, each striving to reclaim moral and emotional high ground. Crew members moved cautiously, some attempting verbal mediation, others positioning themselves strategically between the two men. But the tension was so palpable that even the smallest gesture could trigger another eruption. Every glance, every subtle twitch, every breath seemed amplified, heavy with meaning, as the emotional energy radiated outward, infecting the room with a charged intensity that was impossible to ignore. Old grievances surfaced with the force of a tidal wave. Mendeecees brought up incidents where he felt undermined, ignored, or publicly embarrassed, recalling them with a precision that suggested they had been catalogued and stored with painful care over years of friendship. Kirk, equally prepared, countered with moments where he had felt betrayed or misrepresented, painting a picture of mistrust and frustration that had long simmered beneath the surface. "You really think I've forgotten the premiere?" Mendeecees shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of accumulated emotion. Kirk's retort was immediate and cutting. "Forget it. You twisted everything to serve your own narrative." The volley of accusations left the crew watching in stunned silence, recognizing that this confrontation had grown far beyond professional disagreements. It had transformed into a deeply personal battlefield, with trust and respect hanging precariously in the balance. Family members present to support both men found themselves caught in the crossfire, their pleas for calm drowned out by the torrent of anger and recrimination. Every word exchanged seemed to open a new wound, and the emotional intensity continued to climb, turning each interaction into a high-stakes negotiation of pride, history, and hurt. During a brief lull, a production assistant inadvertently referenced a conversation that Mendeecees had allegedly had about Kirk weeks earlier, which Kirk immediately interpreted as a personal attack. "That never happened," Mendeecees protested, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fury. Kirk leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Don't lie to me. I know exactly what was said." The miscommunication reignited the storm with renewed force, turning a simple misunderstanding into a full-scale confrontation over credibility and trust. Crew members attempted to intervene, but each effort seemed to only feed the intensity. The emotional energy now a tangible force within the studio. Friends and relatives watched with mounting anxiety, unsure whether to separate the two men physically or simply allow the drama to unfold, knowing that either choice could have far-reaching consequences. As the confrontation continued, the nature of the verbal exchanges grew increasingly personal and pointed. Kirk criticized Mendeecees' judgment, leadership, and even his decision-making outside of work, while Mendeecees fired back with attacks on Kirk's ego, temperament, and perceived failures. Each verbal blow landed with weight, leaving both men exposed and the crew collectively holding its breath, aware that the slightest escalation could lead to a physical confrontation. The emotional stakes were now immense, and the drama unfolded in a way that seemed almost cinematic in its intensity. Fans following every update online were captivated, dissecting each word and gesture, debating loyalties, and analyzing the psychological dynamics at play. A pivotal moment occurred when Kirk, in a rare gesture of vulnerability, admitted, "I've made mistakes too." Mendeecees' reaction was one of surprise, the sudden honesty catching him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, suspicion and curiosity intertwined in his tone. Kirk's voice softened slightly. "I've been frustrated as well, and pretending everything is fine hasn't helped either of us." The acknowledgement did not immediately resolve the conflict but introduced a subtle shift in the emotional dynamic. It was a reminder that both men were human, both had been hurt, and both were navigating the precarious balance between pride and reconciliation. Fans online immediately seized upon this moment, speculating about the potential for reconciliation, even as tension continued to simmer. The argument evolved into a strategic interplay of emotion and psychology. Kirk sought to maintain authority and control through reasoned arguments, while Mendeecees used emotional appeals and pointed recollections of past grievances to challenge him. The intricate dance between pride, frustration, and vulnerability created a charged atmosphere, one that left the crew on edge and the audience captivated. Every gesture, glance, and pause became a component of the high-stakes drama, with the potential to tip the scales toward reconciliation or further conflict. By mid-afternoon, the confrontation had reached an almost unbearable intensity. Kirk and Mendeecees were fully engaged in a psychological tug-of-war, balancing anger, vulnerability, and pride in a delicate equilibrium. Crew members were acutely aware of the danger, knowing that the emotional toll on both men could manifest in unpredictable ways. The subtle tension was punctuated by moments of reflection, brief pauses in which both men seemed to consider the consequences of their actions and the weight of their long-standing grievances. Yet these glimpses of vulnerability were fleeting, overshadowed by the intensity of unresolved resentment and the relentless pressure of being observed by both friends, family, and millions of fans online. A turning point occurred when Kirk revisited a past incident, framing it in a way that reasserted his grievances and reignited old flames of anger. "Do you even realize the damage you've caused?" he demanded, his voice tight with emotion. Mendeecees' response was immediate, furious, and defensive. "Don't you dare bring that up again. You have no idea." The clash escalated once more, turning the studio into a theater of raw emotion. with each word acting like a detonator. The personal history between the two men became a battlefield, and the staff present struggled to maintain composure, acutely aware that this was no longer just a professional dispute but an emotional war that could have lasting repercussions. Even the briefest moments of silence carried enormous tension. Both Kirk and Mendeecees were hyper-aware of the stakes. Knowing that every glance and gesture was being scrutinized by a global audience, friends and family observed anxiously, witnessing not just a dispute between two men but the unraveling of a bond that had once seemed unbreakable. Subtle movements, fleeting eye contact, and intentional pauses all communicated layers of unspoken emotion, revealing the complex and fragile state of their relationship. As the day drew to its conclusion, exhaustion was evident, yet the tension remained unresolved. Kirk and Mendeecees had confronted each other, aired grievances, and revealed vulnerabilities, but neither had fully achieved closure. The crew departed with heavy hearts, aware that the next encounter could either push the friendship into reconciliation or drive it into irreversible conflict. Fans, captivated by every leaked clip and update, continued to dissect every moment, creating an ongoing narrative that extended far beyond the studio. The story was far from over, with the promise of more emotional confrontations, shocking revelations, and unpredictable twists that would continue to captivate and enthrall audiences worldwide, ensuring that the saga of Kirk and Mendeecees remained at the forefront of entertainment drama for weeks to come. The tension that had been building over the past days now seemed almost tangible, clinging to every corner of the studio as Kirk and Mendeecees prepared for what would be another day of confrontation that neither could escape nor resolve easily. From the moment they stepped onto the set, every movement, every glance, every sigh carried the weight of their previous battles, the air thick with anticipation, dread, and an almost electric sense of inevitability. Kirk moved with deliberate intent, pacing subtly as he reviewed the events in his mind, calculating every word he might say, the tone he would use, the inflection that could assert authority without tipping too far into aggression, while Mendeecees mirrored him with a controlled tension, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning not only Kirk but the crew and family members who hovered nearby, trying to gauge alliances and measure risks. The morning's first scene forced them into close proximity again, a scenario that acted like gasoline thrown onto a smoldering fire, igniting a flurry of exchanged words that quickly escalated beyond professional disagreement into deeply personal territory. A line about trust and responsibility, seemingly harmless in its original intent, became a catalyst for a verbal exchange filled with recrimination, bitterness, and barely suppressed fury. "You think you can lecture me about responsibility?" Mendeecees shot, the edge in his voice slicing through the tense air, causing a ripple of unease among the onlookers who had grown accustomed to witnessing minor squabbles but were now observing a storm of emotion that seemed unstoppable. Kirk's glare was icy, his reply immediate and pointed. "I've carried more weight in this partnership than you could possibly acknowledge, and yet here you are undermining everything with your arrogance." The argument expanded like wildfire, voices overlapping, sharp words cutting deep, memories of past slights resurfacing as ammunition, and old grievances flaring with every sentence. The crew members scrambled to intervene, placing themselves subtly between the two, attempting to de-escalate, but each effort seemed futile against the momentum of years of unresolved tension, misunderstandings, and the subtle, accumulated pain that both men had carried in silence until this point. Friends and family attempted to mediate with pleas and gentle nudges, only to have their voices drowned out by the barrage of accusations, counter-accusations, and emotionally charged retorts. Each word carried history, each pause weighed heavy, and the audience, both present and digital, fed off the intensity, creating a feedback loop that only heightened the stakes. Rumors and leaks from previous days had already fueled speculation, and fans' online commentary added layers of pressure as millions dissected every movement, every flicker of expression, debating the moral high ground, alliances, and predicting the inevitable climactic confrontation that felt both terrifying and magnetic in its appeal. Amidst the chaos, subtle flashes of vulnerability emerged, fleeting yet significant. Kirk's voice occasionally softened as he admitted, almost to himself, that he had contributed to the ongoing strife, while Mendeecees' rigid stance wavered briefly as he remembered the moments of loyalty, friendship, and shared victories that had once bound them. These fragile glimpses of humanity provided only temporary relief before the argument surged again, propelled by pride, ego, and the inexorable pull of unresolved emotional history. The verbal sparring evolved into a psychological duel, with each man alternating between dominance and vulnerability, strategy and emotional expression, analyzing, testing, and probing the other's defenses with relentless intensity. Even moments of silence carried profound weight, each pause filled with anticipation, calculated tension, and the heavy implication of what might come next. The conflict became layered, a tapestry woven from old betrayals, professional frustrations, personal insecurities, and the relentless scrutiny of an audience watching in real time, amplifying every inflection and gesture. At one pivotal moment, a seemingly minor reference to a long-forgotten comment reignited fury, spiraling quickly into a cascade of reminders, accusations, and emotional barbs that had been meticulously preserved in memory over the years. The studio became a pressure cooker, each participant acutely aware that the next word or action could trigger a breakthrough or a breakdown. That reconciliation or complete implosion hung precariously in the balance. Throughout it all, subtle shifts in tone, posture, and facial expression communicated volumes. The slight narrowing of an eye, the tightening of a jaw, the careful positioning of hands, all indicating strategies, vulnerabilities, and intent. The psychological intensity mirrored a battle of chess at lightning speed, where each move carried both immediate consequences and the potential to reshape the broader relationship irreversibly. As the hours passed, exhaustion crept in, though neither man would relent, the emotional and professional stakes too high to allow retreat. The crew, ever vigilant, alternated between intervention and observation, knowing that any misstep could spark a physical altercation or irreparable damage to the fragile truce they had temporarily attempted to maintain. Fans online dissected, leaked videos, screenshots, and commentary with fervor, creating a narrative outside the studio that influenced perception, adding fuel to the fire, and ensuring that the story transcended its immediate context to become a global spectacle of human emotion, conflict, and raw interpersonal drama. Each exchanged phrase, each remembered slight, each defensive retort became part of a larger narrative tapestry, a story of friendship stretched to its limits, of egos and vulnerabilities colliding under the weight of professional ambition, personal loyalty, and public scrutiny. By mid-afternoon, the emotional energy had reached its zenith, with Kirk and Mendeecees engaging in a relentless cycle of confrontation, brief reconciliation, and renewed escalation. Their interactions were punctuated by fleeting acknowledgments of shared struggle, subtle gestures of respect, and moments of psychological brinkmanship, revealing not only the depth of their bond but the fragility of it under strain. Crew and family members could only watch with bated breath, knowing that the day's events were shaping the trajectory of a relationship that had once seemed unbreakable, now hanging in a delicate balance between renewed trust and irreparable fracture. In this charged environment, each subtle nuance, the tilt of a head, the measured pace of breathing, the cadence of speech was laden with significance, creating a narrative as compelling and dramatic as any scripted performance, blurring the line between reality and entertainment. The day concluded with neither man conceding defeat nor achieving full reconciliation, leaving the tension unresolved, the emotional stakes sky high, and the audience, both present and digital, on edge, knowing that the next encounter could bring either healing or catastrophe. The story, rich with psychological complexity, emotional intensity, and human vulnerability, continued to unfold, a living drama that promised new twists, shocking revelations, and emotional highs and lows capable of enthralling fans for weeks to come, ensuring that the saga of Kirk and Mendeecees remained an unmissable spectacle of friendship, conflict, and the enduring struggle between pride and reconciliation. The tension that had gripped the studio in the previous days seemed almost suffocating as the next morning arrived, carrying with it the weight of unresolved emotions and the anticipation of another confrontation between Kirk and Mendeecees. From the moment they entered the set, it was evident that neither was willing to yield ground. Each step they took was measured, deliberate, and heavy with intent. Kirk's movements were precise, almost calculated, as he scanned the room with a hawk-like focus, eyes flicking toward every crew member, family member, and piece of equipment, anticipating potential triggers and preparing mentally for every possible provocation. Mendeecees, equally tense, entered with a rigid posture, shoulders squared, jaw set, projecting a controlled yet palpable intensity that made it clear he was prepared for any verbal or emotional challenge that might arise. The crew, now intimately familiar with the volatility of the situation, moved like shadows, attempting to maintain operational efficiency while constantly assessing risk, aware that a single misstep could ignite another round of explosive conflict. Fans online had already begun speculating, posting, clips and commentary from the previous days, creating a digital storm of analysis, theories, and predictions that only added to the pressure weighing on both men. amplifying their every action and word. The atmosphere was electric, almost like the calm before a hurricane, with tension so thick that it seemed to press against the walls, seeping into every corner, influencing the behaviors, thoughts, and emotional responses of everyone present. The first interaction of the day quickly escalated when the two men were required to perform a scene together. A seemingly simple exchange about responsibility and teamwork acted as a flashpoint, igniting a verbal barrage that would continue for hours. "You think loyalty is a joke?" Mendeecees snapped, his voice sharp and cutting through the studio like a knife. Kirk's response was immediate and forceful. "I've shown more loyalty than you'll ever understand, and yet you constantly undermine me." The argument surged back and forth, each statement layered with years of suppressed frustration, past grievances, and a complex history that neither man could ignore. Crew members attempted intervention, positioning themselves subtly to prevent physical escalation. But their presence did little to reduce the intensity, which seemed to grow with every exchanged word. Friends and family on set were caught in the crossfire, pleading for calm, their voices drowned out by the crescendo of anger, defensiveness, and emotional vulnerability. Every glance, subtle gesture, and pause in the argument carried weight, signaling shifts in psychological strategy, attempts to assert dominance, and fleeting moments of acknowledgement that each man was both hurt and unwilling to yield. As the argument unfolded, the conversation moved from professional grievances to deeply personal territory. Mendeecees dredged up incidents where he felt deceived, belittled, or undermined, articulating them with a precision that suggested these memories had been catalogued and preserved for years, ready to be invoked at the first opportunity. Kirk responded with equally pointed examples, highlighting moments where he had felt betrayed, misrepresented, or publicly humiliated. "You think I forgot what you said at the premiere?" Mendeecees demanded, his voice tight with emotion. Kirk's retort was immediate and piercing. "Forget it. You twisted everything to suit your narrative." The verbal blows landed with force, leaving both men emotionally exposed while the crew watched in a mix of awe, fear, and fascination. Friends and family attempted to mediate, offering reasoned perspectives and emotional support, but even their interventions were swept aside in the torrent of exchanged grievances, each one layered with past wounds and unspoken resentment. Midway through the day, a seemingly minor comment from a production assistant acted as a spark, reigniting a dispute that had previously been simmering beneath the surface. The assistant referenced a conversation that Mendeecees allegedly had about Kirk, which Kirk immediately interpreted as a betrayal. "That never happened," Mendeecees exclaimed, incredulity and fury coloring his tone. Kirk leaned forward, eyes blazing with conviction. "Don't lie to me. I know exactly what you said." The studio seemed to vibrate with intensity, the argument surging to new heights, as every nuance of tone, gesture, and facial expression became magnified under the weight of years of unresolved tension. Crew members tried to intervene, some speaking gently, others placing themselves physically between the two men. But the emotional charge in the room was now so dense that each attempt only fueled the fire. Friends and family watched in tense silence, understanding that the day's events were shaping the long-term trajectory of a relationship that had once been defined by trust, camaraderie, and shared victories, now teetering precariously on the edge of collapse. The confrontation evolved into a psychological chess match, with Kirk carefully selecting his words, balancing assertiveness with controlled vulnerability, while Mendeecees used emotional intensity and reminders of past slights to counter and challenge him. Each verbal maneuver was calculated, designed to test, provoke, and assert dominance without completely surrendering ground. The complexity of their interactions revealed the depth of the emotional entanglement, the intricate weave of friendship, betrayal, pride, and professional ambition that defined their relationship. Crew members were acutely aware of the potential for escalation, watching each gesture, glance, and micro-expression for signs that the tension might tip into physical confrontation or irreversible emotional fracture. By late afternoon, the conflict had reached a level of intensity that was both mesmerizing and exhausting. Kirk and Mendeecees alternated between intense verbal exchanges and fleeting moments of introspective calm, brief pauses where vulnerability showed itself in subtle gestures, a hand running through hair, a momentary slump of the shoulders, a quiet, unguarded breath. These glimpses of humanity provided temporary relief, moments when the possibility of reconciliation seemed plausible, yet the underlying tension remained a constant, inescapable presence. Each man was acutely aware of the stakes, not only the immediate outcome of the confrontation, but the long-term impact on personal relationships, professional reputation, and public perception. Fans online dissected every leaked clip, screenshot, and comment, interpreting every nuance as a turning point. Each analysis adding layers of pressure that neither Kirk nor Mendeecees could ignore. A pivotal moment came when Kirk revisited a past incident, framing it in a way that reasserted his perspective and reignited old anger. "Do you realize the damage you've caused?" he demanded, voice tight with restrained emotion. Mendeecees' face contorted with fury and disbelief. "Don't you dare bring that up again. You have no idea." The verbal clash escalated once more, turning the studio into a theater of raw, unfiltered emotion, with each word, gesture, and glance acting as a catalyst for further conflict. The personal history between the two men had become a battlefield, where every memory, slight, and unresolved grievance was weaponized, leaving crew and family members scrambling to maintain composure and prevent total chaos. Even in moments of relative silence, the tension remained palpable. Both men were acutely aware of the audience watching, friends, family, crew, and millions online, adding an almost unbearable layer of pressure to every action. Subtle gestures, like a tilt of the head, a deliberate pause, or a carefully measured breath, carried immense significance, signaling intent, strategy, and emotion. The balance between confrontation and reconciliation was fragile, a constant negotiation between pride, vulnerability, and the desire to assert one's position without collapsing entirely under the weight of past grievances. As the day drew to a close, neither man had yielded. Exhaustion was evident, yet the emotional stakes remained unresolved, leaving the studio charged with anticipation for the next encounter. Kirk and Mendeecees had confronted each other, aired grievances, and revealed vulnerabilities, but the path forward remained uncertain. Their bond stretched taut between reconciliation and irreparable fracture. Crew and family members left with heavy hearts, knowing that the story was far from over, that each subsequent interaction had the potential to bring either healing or disaster. Fans continued to monitor every development, the saga unfolding as a mesmerizing, unrelenting spectacle of friendship, conflict, and the complex interplay of human emotion, pride, and loyalty, promising that the drama between Kirk and Mendeecees would continue to dominate conversations, both on set and in the digital world, for weeks and perhaps months to come. The studio was steeped in an almost tangible tension as Kirk and Mendeecees prepared for another grueling day of filming, the air heavy with anticipation, dread, and the unspoken awareness that every interaction could ignite another intense confrontation. From the moment they entered, the energy between them was electric, as though the space itself had absorbed the echoes of their previous arguments and was now primed for further explosions. Kirk moved with deliberate precision, pacing briefly, eyes scanning the room for potential triggers, mentally preparing strategies for verbal engagement, calculating the exact balance between authority and provocation, while Mendeecees mirrored this preparation with a rigid posture, jaw clenched, shoulders squared, every step exuding the controlled intensity of a man ready for battle. Crew members, now seasoned veterans of the ongoing tension, navigated around them cautiously, aware that even minor missteps could catalyze another emotional eruption. The digital world outside the studio added to the pressure, with social media alive with speculation, memes, commentary, and analysis, fans dissecting every word, glance, and body movement from the previous confrontations, creating a feedback loop that amplified the stakes in ways neither Kirk nor Mendeecees could ignore. Every gesture, pause, and subtle inflection became freighted with meaning, a delicate dance of psychological posturing, pride, and unresolved personal history. The morning scene required Kirk and Mendeecees to act in close proximity once again, and the proximity itself acted as a spark, igniting emotional responses that had been simmering just beneath the surface. What should have been a routine line about teamwork and accountability instead became a catalyst for renewed tension, triggering a torrent of verbal barbs and emotional outpouring. "You think loyalty is something I don't value?" Mendeecees demanded, his voice taut with pent-up frustration, slicing through the tense air. Kirk's response was equally sharp, eyes narrowing, voice controlled but heavy with conviction. "I've shown more loyalty than you can comprehend, yet you continue to undermine every effort I make." The verbal volley escalated quickly, each accusation layered with years of past grievances, each counterpoint crafted to inflict maximum psychological impact, revealing wounds that had never fully healed. Crew members tried to intervene subtly, standing between them, speaking gently, attempting to diffuse the emotional charge. Yet the intensity was so thick that each intervention seemed to only heighten the storm. Friends and family present on set pleaded for calm, their voices often drowned out by the crescendo of anger, defensiveness, and raw vulnerability, leaving them watching helplessly as the once unbreakable bond teetered on the edge of complete fracture. The conflict quickly moved beyond professional disagreements into deeply personal territory. Mendeecees dredged up incidents where he had felt disrespected, misrepresented, or belittled, articulating them with precision. Each memory a loaded weapon meticulously preserved for moments like this. Kirk, refusing to be outmaneuvered, countered with carefully chosen examples of betrayal, miscommunication, and public humiliation, crafting a narrative that mirrored the grievances presented by Mendeecees. "Do you think I forgot what you said at the premiere?" Mendeecees snapped, eyes blazing. Kirk's retort was immediate, slicing through the tension. "Forget it. You twisted every word to serve your own ego." The intensity of the exchange left crew members and family members alike in stunned silence, recognizing that the confrontation had evolved far beyond workplace disagreements. It had become a battle over trust, respect, and long-buried emotional scars. Midday brought an unexpected catalyst when a production assistant, unaware of the powder keg they were walking into, casually referenced a conversation that Mendeecees had allegedly had about Kirk weeks earlier. Kirk seized on it immediately, interpreting it as an act of betrayal. "That never happened." Mendeecees protested, shock and fury coloring his tone. Kirk leaned forward aggressively, eyes locked on his counterpart, voice rising. "Don't lie to me. I know exactly what you said." The room seemed to vibrate with intensity as the argument surged to unprecedented heights. The emotional charge in the air so dense it seemed almost physical. Crew members, trying desperately to mediate, moved strategically between the two men, but every effort was undermined by the sheer force of history, pride, and accumulated resentment pressing from every direction. Friends and family members, aware of the potential consequences, alternated between attempts at calming the situation and holding their collective breath, knowing that this was not a simple argument but a profound and emotionally charged confrontation with lasting implications. The battle of words gradually evolved into a nuanced psychological duel. Kirk sought to maintain authority and rationality, framing his arguments in ways designed to assert control while subtly exposing vulnerabilities, while Mendeecees leveraged emotional intensity, personal recollections, and strategic reminders of past slights to challenge and destabilize him. Each verbal exchange was laden with subtext, layered with history, and infused with raw human emotion, creating an intricate web of interpersonal dynamics that left everyone on set, as well as the millions following online, riveted. The audience dissected each nuance, each flicker of expression, each momentary lapse of composure, constructing narratives, taking sides, and speculating about outcomes, transforming the conflict into a spectacle that transcended the studio walls and extended into the digital sphere. By late afternoon, the tension reached its zenith. Kirk and Mendeecees had engaged in multiple rounds of confrontation, brief lulls punctuated by moments of reflection, subtle gestures of vulnerability, and fleeting acknowledgments of the bond they once shared. Kirk admitted, quietly yet firmly, "I've made mistakes too. I've been frustrated, and I haven't always handled things the right way." The admission, while not dissolving the tension, introduced a complex layer of emotional nuance. Mendeecees, caught off guard, responded with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "What exactly are you saying?" The interaction highlighted the fragile balance between pride and humility, between maintaining a stance and reaching toward reconciliation, revealing that beneath the anger and recrimination lay a complex web of loyalty, hurt, and emotional investment. Fans online immediately latched onto this moment, interpreting it as a potential turning point, analyzing every syllable, gesture, and facial expression for hints of reconciliation or renewed conflict. As the hours passed, the argument transitioned into an intricate dance of control, emotion, and strategy. Both men alternated between verbal aggression and rare moments of introspection, using subtle cues, body language, and carefully measured tones to assert dominance, gauge reactions, and test the psychological boundaries of the other. Crew members navigated the space with extreme caution, aware that any interruption could trigger a physical or emotional eruption, while friends and family remained on edge, observing, supporting, and bracing for the next flashpoint. The psychological intensity of the interaction revealed the complexity of their relationship: pride, past grievances, professional stakes, and deeply held emotions intersecting in a volatile mixture that seemed almost impossible to navigate. Every exchanged word, every gesture, and every pause carried profound meaning, signaling shifts in strategy, acknowledgement of past wounds, or subtle attempts at reconciliation. By evening, exhaustion was evident, yet the tension remained unresolved. Kirk and Mendeecees had navigated hours of confrontation, emotional exposure, and strategic dialogue. But neither had yielded completely, leaving the atmosphere thick with unresolved emotion. The crew and family members departed the set fatigued, yet watchful, knowing that the saga was far from over, and that the next encounter could tip the balance toward either repair or total collapse. Fans continued to dissect leaks, clips, and commentary with fervor, creating a narrative outside the studio that intensified the stakes and amplified the drama. The story of Kirk and Mendeecees had transcended a simple feud, evolving into an immersive, ongoing spectacle of human emotion, psychological tension, pride, loyalty, and the fragile, complex nature of friendship strained to its limits, ensuring that audiences remained captivated, invested, and eager for the next chapter of this unforgettable saga. Thank you for staying with us through every shocking moment of Kirk and Mendeecees' explosive confrontation. The tension, the betrayals, the raw emotions. It's a story that keeps unfolding, and only time will tell whether their friendship can survive the storm. We want to hear from you. What do you think sparked the biggest rift? Who do you side with in this intense showdown? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on every dramatic twist, every heated exchange, and every secret that comes to light.